Look at the time. Wow. It's after dark, so it must be time for Legal AF. Donald Trump's henchmen and his inner circle, like Rudy Giuliani and Ken Chesebro and the rest, are trying very hard to benefit in some way from Donald Trump being elected president again. But that's not how supremacy clause works. And that's not how separation of powers work. And that's not how the immunity decision by the United States Supreme Court works. And so we've got developments in Georgia involving Ken Chesebro and cases there involving Donald Trump. And we got the weird and sordid affair of Rudy Giuliani, who's between not one, but two federal judges and a prison sentence. I'll cover it with Ben Meiselas on Legal AF. Take a listen.
Michael Popok, sanctions everywhere with Rudy Giuliani. Sanctions are not going away anytime
in two courts.
Soon.
Two judges.
Not really a good nursery rhyme. So there's lots of sanctions. There's different cases. Yeah. There was what happened in D.C. with Beryl Howell. There was a federal court in New York. It just seems every day I wake up and you're doing a hot take on Giuliani sanctions. So explain all the different sanctions and all the different courts.
I'm going to do a Ben Meiselas weave, registered trademark, on those two issues right now. Here we go. You got two pissed off judges. You heard of rock in a hard place? This is between two pissed off federal judges. That's where Rudy Giuliani finds himself because of his own conduct or misconduct. He's never played by the rules when it relates to this Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss case, which two mother-daughter team just doing their civic duty, counting ballots, 2020 in Fulton County, Georgia, not passing a hard drive. This is Rudy Giuliani between them. I don't know if he's ever seen a hard drive. Not passing a hard drive between each other filled with Biden votes. They were just counting votes. They've been cleared by everyone that's looked at it, from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to the Secretary of State of Georgia and everybody else, including the videos, but not in the addled mind of Rudy Giuliani and others, who continues as recently as the 12th and 14th of November on his podcast. And nobody watches except when I have to do research about him, where he said that they were fraudulently passing hard drives again and committing voter fraud. It's just ghastly what he continues to do. He's staring down the barrel of $150 million judgment that resulted from a default and then a jury awarding the damages because he refused and violated at least 9 different court orders in the D.C. defamation case before Beryl Howell. Hold that point, because we're going to talk about Beryl Howell. Then they got the judgment and delay. Rudy Giuliani filed bankruptcy. It was found to be a fraudulent bankruptcy in bad faith, and it was thrown out. So there goes that. Then they started circling and getting to his assets. He doesn't have let me just spoiler alert. He doesn't have $150 million. Okay. He's got some maybe $10 million in stuff, an apartment in New York worth about $5 million, an apartment in a condo near Mar-a-Lago in Florida worth about $3 to $5 million, maybe more, the way that Florida's heating up these days again in real estate. He's got Yankee rings from when he was the mayor. He's got an old gold watch his grandfather gave him. I thought I was listening to Pulp Fiction when I heard about this gold watch, and some assorted other things that he owns and bank accounts and all. And then he's got income from his podcast. He's got income from a pension when he was U.S. attorney. It's hard to believe he was U.S. attorney and mayor and all of that. So you got all that going on. And he's been trying to hide the assets, an old car and all of this from Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss's lawyers and them. And he's pissing off the judge in New York. This is Judge Lyman in another federal court who's overseeing the enforcement of the judgment against Rudy Giuliani's assets. We're out of bankruptcy court. We're in a regular federal court to enforce it. And the only remaining issue, he's already gotten the keys of his New York apartment has finally been turned over to Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss, and they have that. The last, and some other items as well. The car finally got turned over. Rudy Giuliani's gone through a series of lawyers who have all quit him for failure to pay or because he's acting crazy and they don't want him to be their client anymore. He finally landed on a former cop from 9/11 who was friends with the mayor at the time, who's now a personal injury lawyer in Staten Island, Joe Camarata, to be his current lawyer in New York. In Washington, he's got to go back to Washington because he's in contempt of court or he's going to be found to be in contempt of court before Judge Beryl Howell because he violated a consent decree, a consent agreement, which he agreed not to continue to bash Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, or they would continue to litigate against him. He said, no, where do I sign? I won't do it anymore. I'm sorry. And he signed it, but he keeps doing it. And so the judge saw the videos of the podcast and called him in for the 12th of December into a contempt hearing in person in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, he had to file a piece of paper to oppose their motion for contempt. Same lawyers, just different courtrooms. He filed some piece of crap. He didn't sign his name to it. And apparently in D.C., he's by himself. He's got no lawyer. And he's what we call pro se. And the judge looked at this piece of paper and said, I know you're pro se, and I usually bend over backwards to let people kind of get away with not knowing our rules and procedures, but you were the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. I mean, you don't have any bar license anymore, but you once had them. And this is a first-year lawyer wouldn't send this in to me. So she rejected it and said, try it again, and I'll see you on the 12th of December. Judge Lyman, who's in New York, has got his two major issues. He's got to decide on the 15th of January, just before the inauguration, whether the Florida condo is going over to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss or not. And the issue there is, I lived in Florida, kind of get this. There's something called homestead protection in Florida. It's why every deadbeat goes to Florida and buys a big house, because they can hide their money in their house, and the house will not go off to the judgment creditor because it's got homestead protection. But there's a critical date. When you establish the homestead protection, has to be before the judgment got recorded against you. That date is August 8th for Giuliani. So he has to show that by August 8th, he was a resident and had a homestead in Florida in that Mar-a-Lago adjacent condo. Problem is, it looks like as late as the 6th of August, he was trying to establish residency in New Hampshire. So, and he hasn't turned over a document or information that sounds familiar to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss about the issue of his homestead. And they have a deposition coming up in a week. So they filed a motion for contempt against him there. And what they're arguing there is, if he hasn't turned it over, it's because he either doesn't have it or it's against him. So judge, forget financial hitting him with fines because he has no money. We're getting all of his money. Hit him with an adverse inference that he's obviously hiding bad documents, and assume that he doesn't have any good documents when you make the decision about whether he is or is not a Florida resident on a certain date and give us the condo. That's what they're asking for. It's a pretty compelling argument, and we're going to hear from Judge Lyman on that soon, because there's a response that has to be applied. So you got Lyman, who's just itching, Judge Lyman, to issue a contempt sanction against Rudy for screwing around about the condo in Florida, while Judge Beryl Howell wants to know why he continues to bash Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. And then she's going to have to fashion some sort of sanction that doesn't involve money. And that's where jail comes in. And so that's the two concentric circles that are kind of colliding here that are bringing Rudy Giuliani down. And in the meantime, he's crying to both judges about, I want to be in the inauguration. I'm going to be up there on the stage and all of that. That's where we are.
You know, the funny one, too, Ken Chesebro in Georgia, which we could talk about a little bit as well. One of Donald Trump's other lawyers, right? He thought he was going to get the sweetheart deal by being the first to take a guilty plea in the Georgia RICO case, right? So he pled guilty. But then shortly thereafter, the Georgia Court of Appeals basically, derailed and delayed the entire case. Because remember, then it got into all of the attacks on Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. And now it doesn't seem like there's going to be accountability, not just for Donald Trump in Georgia, but also the co-conspirators there as well. Also, everything's kind of related here, and the intersection of law and politics, we don't really cover like the Young Thug trial. It's covered on the True Crime MTN, where Dave Aronberg talks about it. But Fani Willis in the Fulton County District Attorney's Office was handed a really bad loss in their other big RICO case, like a really bad loss. That Young Thug case was their big case. It lasted like a year, that trial. And then it resulted in basically no guilty convictions. I mean, there was one charge for firearm possession, but otherwise everybody was not guilty. There was a number of really embarrassing missteps as well throughout the case about hiding evidence. And it was just a bad look for Fulton County, where all of the kind of appellate divisions and the Georgia Supreme Court are looking for ways to kind of smack down the Fulton County prosecutors. And same thing with the Republican-led legislature in Georgia. So it's like when you've got a high-profile case like that, you can't lose it in that kind of embarrassing fashion. It has a ripple effect.
Well, welcome back. We do that show for the last 4.5 years, twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the MeidasTouch Network. I got a new show at the intersection of law and politics called Popok Live. What else? Tuesdays, 8 p.m. on the MeidasTouch Network. And then we formed a new Legal AF YouTube channel, also at the intersection of law and politics, where we don't blow smoke or sunshine. And we called it, what else? Legal AF. Help us build that pro-democracy channel as well. Nobody tells me what to say. Nobody puts baby in a corner. We are here on the MeidasTouch Network, speaking the truth and speaking truth to power. And we do it on a regular basis. If you know all about Legal AF, take that clip, send it off to people in your life, and ask them to join. What are they waiting for? Find out why we call it Legal AF. You'll find out when you listen to the show on a regular basis. And then if you don't know anything about the show, all kidding aside, I'm Michael Popok. I'm personally inviting you to join our journey as part of your own. So until my next contribution of all things Legal AF, this is Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.